the functions of intonation. While discussing the suprasegmental features of human speech, we went through various types of suprasegmental features, like we discussed syllable, stress, primary stress, secondary stress, then the role of stress, and the description of stress. We also went through tone, right, the role of pitch and tone, and then we also discussed the intonation, the features of intonation, and like how is intonation transcribed, what are the symbols which are used for various types of intonation, right? So having discussed the forms of intonation, now we are required to go through intonation a bit further, and we discuss the functions of intonation, the particular role of intonation which is important, and how does intonation creates meaning in our speech, right? Remember that the role of intonation is in syntagmatic dimension, right? If you remember the paradigmatic and syntagmatic relationship, like the intonation does play its role along with other features, like along with discourse, for example. That's the role of intonation, which tells us more about the discourse and also something about the grammaticalities of the speech, right? So the nature of the role of intonation is syntagmatic. Basically, intonation provides various types of meanings, right? Linguistic meanings as well as non-linguistic meanings. And we'll discuss that how the linguistic meanings are conveyed and how the non-linguistic meanings are conveyed, right? The starting point is that can you imagine of a speech in which intonation is not available? And does it possible for the speech to occur without intonation, without having the features of intonation? And the answer is that if there is any speech, any talk without melody, without the rhythmic features of the speech, then that would be very, very mechanical, right? The liveliness of speech, of talk is hidden in intonation. That's a very important point about the intonation. And intonation is not actually what is said by the speaker, right? But the point is that how it is said, right? And what is trying to convey, right? Through those words, which of course carry various dictionary meanings. But then what is conveyed? And that's done by intonation. That's the role of intonation. Intonation provides hints to our emotional and attitudinal state of mind, right? Like what's the attitude of the speaker? What's the emotional state of the speaker, right? So that's something important. And then we also create the effect of prominence within sentences, within utterances, right? Within speech, just by the function of intonation. That's provided by intonation. And we also just get the idea. We just have the idea that the grammatical structure of the speech and about the, the syntactic boundaries, right? Like how is the phrase boundary, maintained, and how a clause is ending and where a sentence is finishing. So these grammatical features, these grammatical boundaries are, made by the intonation. That's conveyed by the intonation, right? Intonation is one of the important suprasegmental features, and the grammatical boundaries, which is conveyed by intonation about the word structure, the phrase, and the clause, and the sentence boundaries. That's an important role played by intonation. Another important role is played by intonation. Intonation tells us, and that's the focus of the prominence within sentence, that what is new in the sentence? What's new information? What's already known to the interlocutors? Because the prominence, the stress is always carried by the new information. So this difference between the previously given and the new information is also very, very important, and that's played by intonation. Intonation provides us the very specific kind of emotions, attitude, and effect of prominence. And we know by now that how important it is to convey the attitude of the speaker, the emotion of the speaker. Although there is, a very deeply and by default available structure in the international patterns of languages. And that may not be universal. Remember, that may be required to be described cross-linguistically. We have to explore it further. But the point is that that's something very special, which is conveyed by the intonation and the international patterns, right? So that's the function of intonation. And remember that intonation considerably overlaps with discourse. And I mentioned this earlier, that the syntagmatic relationship between discourse and intonation is there. And intonation provides those meanings, those informations, which are not conveyed by the segments or the words or the dictionary meanings of the speech, right? But that's something which is, while overlapping with discourse, that's conveyed by intonation. And that's the plus point of intonation. We need to explore it further, and we need to understand that how intonation works, right? We'll continue with the discussion of the functions of intonation in the next session as well.